One man's decision in 1922 would ripple through generations. When Francis Jowett Grosvenor left his wife and 3 children in St. Paul, Minnesota, he did more than end a marriage. He fractured a family. In the years that followed, he would reinvent himself under a new name, building a second life while the first one struggled on without him. And the consequences of that choice echoed through his children's lives in ways no one could have foreseen. This is not fiction. This is the story of a real family, full of heartbreak, reinvention, survival, and secrets buried in public records for nearly a century. Welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you found this channel. I'm a genealogical researcher, and this is Beyond Generations Genealogy, where we dig into the records, follow the paper trails, and bring real stories back to life. Today, I want to take you through one of those stories that reminds me exactly why this work matters. It involves a man who reinvented himself, a woman who held everything together on her own, and children who were shaped by choices they had no say in. This is the story of Francis Jowett Grosvenor and Lucy Ellen Forbis, my great-great-grandparents. The first 2 decades of the 20th century were marked by rapid change. America was urbanizing, industry was reshaping daily life, and families moved frequently in search of work and stability. The story of Francis Jowett Grosvenor and Lucy Ellen Forbis unfolds against that backdrop of motion and uncertainty. Their lives would carry them from Massachusetts to Texas, to Missouri, to Minnesota and Michigan, a restless geography that mirrors the instability of their marriage. Francis Jowett Grosvenor came into the world on November 17, 1887, in Andover, Massachusetts. His parents were James Grosvenor Jr. and Mary Alice Jowett. By 1900, young Francis was living in Dallas, Texas, with his mother, his stepfather, James D. Langdon, who worked as a piano tuner, and his sister, Harriet. And that connection to the piano trade would follow Francis for the rest of his working life. In 1908, Francis briefly listed in the Pennsylvania National Guard in Philadelphia. His enlistment record paints a picture: 21 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, 146 pounds, dark complexion, gray eyes, and brown hair. His service lasted less than 6 months. The record gives us one telling detail: he moved from city, and that would become a pattern. By 1910, the family had settled in Kansas City, Missouri. Over the next decade, Francis moved from job to job: house painter, elevator operator, packer, piano finisher, driver, Victrola mechanic. He kept returning to the piano and phonograph trades, industries that themselves were being transformed as recorded sound reshaped American life. His employment history reads less like a career and more like a man always looking for the next thing, never quite planting roots. One small but memorable detail survives in his 1917 World War I draft registration, a note stating he can't stand heat. Whether that was a medical condition or simply a personal preference, we'll never know. But it's one of the few moments of personality the records preserve. He does not appear to have served in active wartime duty. Lucy Ellen Forbis was born on December 21, 1893, in Dresden, Pettis County, Missouri. By 1900, her family had moved to Sedalia, Missouri, where her father worked as a carpenter. By 1910, the Forbis family had relocated to Kansas City, and 16-year-old Lucy, who went by Ellen, was already working as a bookbinder in a print office. For working-class families of that era, this is not unusual. Older children's wages often made the difference between getting by and not getting by. Lucy was contributing to her family's survival before she was even an adult. That quiet strength, it would define her for the rest of her life. Francis and Lucy were married on January 5, 1912 in Jackson County, Missouri. He was 24 and she was 18. Their early married life played out in a series of rented houses in Kansas City, a life of frequent moves, typical of working-class urban families of the era. And during those years, 3 children arrived. Mary Frances, born in 1913, Helen Florence, born in 1916, and Eugene Russell, born in 1918. Eugene, the youngest, arrived during the catastrophic influenza pandemic of 1918, a time when the world was already reeling. By 1920, the family had relocated to St. Paul, Minnesota, where Francis was working as a Victrola repairman. They rented a home on Winter Street in a bustling industrial city shaped by railroads, manufacturing, and the promise of steady work. But that promise of stability did not hold. On June 1st, 1922, Francis left. Family memory preserves that moment with painful clarity. Lucy reportedly threw him out, and he came back some days later and asked if his girlfriend could stay in the house. So Lucy was left alone with 3 children. Mary Frances was 9, Helen was 6, Eugene was just 4 years old. Lucy filed for divorce on August 31st, 1925 in Ramsey County, Minnesota, alleging willful desertion, but Francis could not be located. The court ordered the summons published in a local newspaper, a common method when a spouse had simply vanished. And then the case stalled for years. It wasn't until March 19, 1929, nearly 4 years after Lucy first filed, that the divorce was finally granted by default. Lucy received full custody of the children. After leaving St. Paul, Francis briefly appeared in Kansas City in 1922, and then he vanished from the records, from his family, and from his own name. By 1930, he had resurfaced in Detroit, Michigan as Frederick Brown. He was living with a woman named Sophia Subert, 17 years his junior, and listing her as his wife. No marriage record has been found, and because his divorce from Lucy wasn't even finalized until March of 1929, any marriage earlier than that would not have been a legal marriage. But under his new identity, Francis found the stability that he never managed before. From 1930 until at least 1950, he worked as a finisher at Michigan Bell Telephone Company, holding a steady job, earning a reliable income, even through the depths of the Great Depression. His 1942 World War II draft registration card, filed as Fred Jowett Brown, recorded him in Detroit as being 5 feet 6.5 inches tall, 145 pounds, with blue eyes and gray hair. In his final years, Francis and Sophia returned to Kansas City. He died on December 3rd of 1960 of heart disease complicated by emphysema and asthma. His obituary, published under the name Fred Jowett Brown, listed his wife Sophia and the children he had left behind in St. Paul nearly 40 years before. Lucy faced the years after 1922 as something that no mother should have to be: a single parent of 3 young children with no financial support in an era with almost no safety net. Her divorce complaint states plainly that she worked to support herself and her children, aided at times by charitable sources. She did what she had to do. At some point after 1922, Lucy began a relationship with Olaf Hansen, a Norwegian immigrant, Spanish-American war veteran, and a janitor. Together, they would have 2 more children: Kenneth, born in April 1928, and Faye, born in August of 1929. By 1930, the blended Hansen household was established in St. Paul. The Depression years were hard. In 1939, Olaf worked only 13 weeks, earning just $180 for the year. The family survived through persistence and shared effort, the same qualities Lucy had been drawing on since 1922. Lucy died on December 2nd, 1968, in St. Paul at the age of 74. She had lived in that city for nearly half a century. She is buried at Fort Snelling National Cemetery alongside Olaf. Every choice a parent makes ripples forward. The story of Francis and Lucy didn't end with them. It continued through 5 children who had to find their own way in a family fractured by that June day in 1922. The eldest child, Mary Frances, grew up in St. Paul during the Depression. She married William Johnson around 1934 and had 6 children with him before they divorced. She later married David Thielen around 1960. That second marriage ended in divorce on October of 1962. On February 25th of 1963, Mary Frances, then 49 years old, temporarily living with her mother and stepfather, went to David Thielen's apartment to retrieve a pair of glasses. Her mother, Lucy, was waiting in a car nearby. Mary Frances did not come back. Thielen later called police and admitted to striking her with a rock and strangling her. She was found dead in his apartment. An autopsy confirmed the cause of death as strangulation. Thielen was charged with first-degree manslaughter. Mary Frances is buried at Elmhurst Cemetery in St. Paul. She was 49 years old. Helen, my great-grandmother, married at 18 and built a large family around her. She lived to the age of 83, leaving behind dozens of descendants, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Of all Frances and Lucy's 3 children together, Helen lived the longest and left the widest generational footprint. Eugene was only 4 years old when his father walked out the door. He grew up, served in the U.S. Army during World War II, and attained the rank of technician 4th grade. He married, raised a family, and lived a full life. He is buried at Fort Snelling National Cemetery, not far from his mother. Kenneth. There are stories in genealogy research that make your heart hurt, and this is one of them. Kenneth was the first child of Lucy and Olaf. He would live exactly 6 years, dying on the very day he was born. His 6th birthday was supposed to be a celebration. A cake stood on the table, presents were waiting, guests were expected. An hour before the party was to begin, Olaf took Kenneth and his 4-year-old sister Faye to a nearby candy store as a birthday treat. As they stood waiting for traffic to pass at the corner of Central and Western Avenues, Kenneth broke away from his father and dashed into the street. He ran into the rear of a passing truck and was pulled under the wheel. He died in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. It was recorded as St. Paul's 19th traffic fatality of 1934. Kenneth is buried at Elmhurst Cemetery in St. Paul, the same cemetery where his sister Mary Frances would be laid to rest nearly 30 years later. Faye was just 4 years old when she stood beside her father at that street corner on Kenneth's birthday. She grew up, worked in manufacturing, married, and raised a family of her own. She was the last surviving child of Lucy and Olaf Hansen. Every family carries stories like this. Stories of resilience, of heartbreak, of reinvention and survival. They are not always tidy, they are not always comfortable, but they are real. And they shape the generations that follow in ways both visible and invisible. Piecing together the lives of Frances and Lucy required patience. Records scattered across states, court files, census pages, and forgotten newspaper columns. It required a willingness to sit with difficult truths. But it is in that careful reconstruction that the past becomes human again. If you have ever wondered about the unfinished chapters in your own family's history, know that those stories can be found. Sometimes they're waiting quietly in forgotten records, waiting to be brought back into the light. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. I share stories like this regularly, along with research tips, record guides, and everything you need to start digging into your own family's past. At Beyond Generations Genealogy, I help families uncover stories just like this one. Whether you're hitting a brick wall in your research, starting completely from scratch, or you have years of notes and you're finally ready to turn them into a meaningful family history book, I'm here to help. I work with families who want more than a list of names and dates. I work with families who want to understand who their people were and to give that story to the generations coming behind them. Because the stories you uncover today become the legacy you leave tomorrow. If you're ready to bring your ancestors back into the light, I would be honored to help. Links to learn more are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep following those threads. You never know where they might lead.